I spent some time yesterday talking about how the reflexive reaction from the Republicans in charge of the state of Texas to the power outages that are happening tragically in the wake of a storm and cold weather were blamed on anything on the left that Republicans could come up with. We talked about them blaming the Green New Deal, which of course hasn't happened. We talked about them blaming wind turbines, which of course represent just a small fraction of the energy generation in Texas. And the truth is, as Philip Bump writes in the Washington Post in a really good article that I encourage you to check out, it has been extraordinarily misleading what Republicans have done when it comes to pointing fingers and placing blame in the state of Texas for what is going on. Of course, anybody talking about the Green New Deal is ignoring or misleading in the sense that none of what Texas decided to do with their power grid has anything to do with the Green New Deal, other than the fact that they've done a little bit of wind power, and a little bit of solar power. But the reality is that that represents a very small percentage of Texas's power generation. And the truth about what's going on in Texas is a combination of Republicans who have opted, in order to avoid what they call federal regulation of their energy markets, have their own power grid. Whereas just about, I don't want to go hyperbolic, but almost every other part of the world has a broader, more interconnected power grid than just one state, the way Texas has. That puts Texas at significant risk in exactly situations like this. But it's not just that. It's also that they had a decade to deal with exactly the issue they're having now. As we talked about yesterday, Texas had a similar power outage situation in 2011. A report was done. Tons of money was spent on figuring out what happened and how do you prevent it from happening again. And they figured out how to prevent it from happening again. And it includes the winterization of wind turbines, but more importantly, of instruments at natural gas, coal, and nuclear power plants, which are the majority of Texas energy. And they didn't do it. They opted not to do that. Other states that have wind power and other types of power, and it gets cold, places like Montana and Wyoming and others, they've done the winterization. So when it gets cold, the wind turbines work, everything works fine. Okay, so this is an example of a Republican stronghold blaming a problem in some cases it's caused, in some cases it's failed to deal with, on Democrats or the left or progressivism or climate science or whatever the case may be. And this is a trend. This is something that they have been doing on the right for a very long time. The right does tax cuts, and the tax cuts, rather than helping the economy, don't help the economy because they give the tax cuts to the rich and trickle down doesn't actually work. And somehow they blame Democrats. They'll do tax cuts for the rich and say this is going to be great. It's not. And then they say, oh, well, the problem is Democratic social programs. The tax cuts for the rich would have worked were it not for the Democratic social programs. The housing disaster in 2008, which of course was the result of under-regulation of mortgages and of derivatives from mortgages, including the packaging up of mortgages and selling them. We've talked about that. Really, it's a problem of under-regulation for a very long time, primarily under George W. Bush, or most acutely under George W. Bush. They said it's take your pick. The list of things they blamed is very, very long, but some combination of Democratic policy in cities that created a problem with housing prices. No, the problem was under-regulation led by Republicans dating back to the sort of ideology of Reagan in the 1980s. The deregulation of the energy industry more broadly. That's part of what we're seeing in Texas, but not only. That has not been good for states that have adopted it, as states have deregulated energy under the idea of we want to give people choice and we want more competition and players in the market. Everything from scams to exploding prices have taken place. And by the way, not with any increased reliability when it comes to energy, but they blame it on the left. Kansas, a very much cautionary tale. Republicans, including the governor there, Sam Brownback, bankrupting Kansas, going all in on trickle down economics and tax cuts for the rich and whatever else, completely bankrupting Kansas, failing to grow the business base and the revenue base, and blaming Democrats incoherently. They are now blaming COVID deaths and the fact that although COVID deaths are, I mean, listen to the numbers. COVID deaths are down 37% from their peak a month ago. They are blaming COVID deaths, which they didn't even seem to care about when Donald Trump was president, 40% of which were avoidable, on Joe Biden already, despite Donald Trump failing to control it for nearly a full year. Many of these stories in some way are about either deregulation or, when it comes to COVID, not enough federal government involvement. But they continue to create these disasters, blame it on Democrats, even though they are the ones in power, and also blame it on the ideology that is the opposite of what they want, when really they should be looking at their policies of getting government, quote, out of people's lives, deregulation, and so on. If they're so the pattern is, if they're in power and there's a disaster, they blame it on Democrats because Democrats somehow prevented them from doing what they really wanted to do or did something that played as a counterweight to what they did. If Republicans aren't in power, they'll just say Democrats are in power, so it's their fault, even if their obstructionism is actually what caused the problem. Sort of like spoiled children. No accountability, no integrity, no personal responsibility. They take credit for everything and responsibility for nothing. Much like Donald Trump. I mean, it's Donald Trump took that idea that we've seen Republicans put into place over the last 40 years and just exploded it to the 110th percentile. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like things are super quickly going to get any better in Texas. I want to talk about that next. One of our sponsors is Vincero Watches, giving you 15% off. A high-quality wristwatch is the perfect way to elevate your style. Own at least one watch that makes you feel great when you put it on. You can often see me wearing my Vincero watch on the show. Mine is the gunmetal vessel model. I'm a big fan of the metallic look of the face of the watch. I like the silicone strap. You won't find a better made watch for this good a price anywhere else. When you put it on, you know you got more than you paid for. Vincero believes in crafting super quality watches from high-end materials, but selling them at fair prices, which is why they have over 26,000 five-star reviews. And they stand behind every watch they make with a 1-year return policy and 5-year warranty. They'll give you 15% off everything in their store and free shipping at davidpakman.com/watch. Use the coupon code Pakman.